So this is why Samuel Jackson hates Steve Harvey. When you think of Hollywood's power players, you might picture glitzy red carpet events, multi-million-dollar deals, and A-list friendships. Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey. Two towering figures in the entertainment industry seemed to fit that mold perfectly. They were often seen together cruising the ocean on luxurious yachts, sharing laughs at private parties. Fans and tabloids painted their bond as the epitome of friendship goals. But the truth? It's much darker, far more complex, and certainly more twisted than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't long ago that Samuel L. Jackson took a deep breath and blew the lid off a relationship that had been long assumed to be nothing but a shining example of celebrity camaraderie. From vacationing together on yachts with Magic Johnson and his wife Cookie, to posing for photos with Steve and Marjorie Harvey at family dinners in Italy, everything looked picture perfect. But behind the scenes, it wasn't all sunshine and smiles. In fact, what Samuel revealed about Steve Harvey left fans and critics alike in disbelief. The relationship between the two was not what it appeared to be. What had once seemed like a tight-knit bond of mutual respect and understanding was really a web of jealousy, betrayal, and silent approval of some truly shocking behavior. Jackson's revelation hit like a thunderclap, leaving the world questioning. How could two of Hollywood's biggest names be caught up in such a messy behind-the-scenes feud? What caused Samuel to suddenly air the dirty laundry of a friendship that had seemed unbreakable? The answer lies in a series of untold truths about Steve Harvey, from his alleged betrayal of fellow comedians to his controversial silence during a family drama that involved his own daughter. It wasn't just about what Steve Harvey allowed to happen under his own roof. It was the wider narrative of manipulation, power, and control that had been quietly shaping his career. Samuel L. Jackson's decision to speak out wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about shedding light on an uncomfortable truth that many in Hollywood had ignored for years. It's a tale of envy, stolen moments, and the unspoken code of silence that can sometimes reign supreme in Tinseltown. If you think you knew what was going on between these two, you might want to think again. This is the shocking truth behind why Samuel L. Jackson no longer calls Steve Harvey a friend. And it's a story you'll never look at Hollywood the same way again. Before the fame, before the yachts and the glossy photo shoots, Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey were two young men from humble beginnings, each with their own story of struggle, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of success in an unforgiving industry. Born on December 21, 1948 in Washington, D.C., Samuel Leroy Jackson's early life wasn't a glittering tale of privilege. Raised in segregated Chattanooga, Tennessee by his mother and grandparents, Jackson's childhood was one of struggle and resilience. His father had left the family when he was young, leaving Samuel to be raised primarily by his mother, Elizabeth Jackson, a factory worker. The challenges of growing up in the Jim Crow South were apparent, but they didn't deter young Samuel. In high school, Jackson became involved in drama and developed a deep love for acting. However, it wasn't until he attended Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, that his passion truly began to take shape. It was there that he befriended future legends, like filmmaker Spike Lee, who would later play a pivotal role in his rise to fame. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Jackson, like many young black men in America, had his share of battles with authority. In fact, it was during his college years that he began to confront the racial dynamics of his world, including his own identity. Jackson's early adulthood wasn't without hardship either. In the 1970s, he struggled with a serious drug addiction, an issue that would plague him for years. His battle with drugs was so severe that he found himself at rock bottom, even being arrested for possession. But Jackson turned his life around, finding salvation not just in sobriety, but in his craft. In 1981, he landed a pivotal role in the film Ragtime, and from there his career took off. His breakout role in Pulp Fiction 1994 solidified his place in Hollywood, turning him into a household name. But through it all, he never forgot where he came from, his Southern roots, his hard-fought journey to the top, and the personal demons he overcame. Jackson became known for his boldness, both on screen and off, and his refusal to be boxed in by Hollywood's stereotypes. Whether playing a hitman in Pulp Fiction or a Jedi Knight in Star Wars, Samuel's range was unmatched. His willingness to speak his mind, especially on issues of race and politics, made him a larger-than-life figure in Hollywood, but it also earned him enemies. His sharp, no-nonsense persona stood in stark contrast to the smoother, more polished image of other Black Hollywood stars, a persona that Steve Harvey would come to embody. Steve Harvey, born January 17, 1957 in Welch, West Virginia, had a vastly different upbringing. Harvey's childhood was marked by the early loss of his father, and like Jackson, he faced numerous struggles growing up in a working-class family. However, his was a story of resilience and a relentless belief that he could rise above his circumstances. His family relocated to Cleveland, Ohio, where Steve would eventually attend Kent State University, although he would not finish his degree. Unlike Jackson, Harvey's path to fame wasn't through acting, but through comedy. He started doing stand-up in the 1980s, and his first big break came in 1990 when he appeared on Showtime at the Apollo. His charismatic and hilarious style caught the attention of audiences and industry professionals alike. Harvey's sharp wit and ability to blend humor with insightful commentary on everyday life made him a unique figure in the world of comedy. But his rise to success wasn't immediate. In fact, Harvey endured years of hardship before becoming the household name he is today. His first real breakthrough came with the creation of his own sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show, which debuted in 1996. It was a role that captured his essence, full of humor, but also filled with valuable life lessons. At the same time, Harvey's personal life was also under public scrutiny. He had gone through 2 failed marriages before meeting his third wife, Marjorie Bridges, a woman who would eventually become his partner in both life and business. The pair's relationship became a symbol of redemption for Harvey, and their high-profile love story only further fueled his rise to fame. However, the public's perception of Harvey, especially as a family man, would come into question as some of his personal and professional decisions began to stir controversy. Despite the success of his TV shows and stand-up specials, Harvey's reputation was far from flawless. His personal life, particularly his relationships with other comedians, would soon come under a microscope. The man who had authored a best-selling book titled Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, offering relationship advice to women, was now being scrutinized for his own personal choices, especially when it came to his family. And as his career skyrocketed, so did the enemies he made along the way. Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey's paths likely first crossed in the early 1990s, both rising stars in a rapidly changing Hollywood landscape. While their careers were quite different, they shared similar backgrounds. Both men had struggled against the odds to make it in a world that often didn't give black men the opportunities they deserved. Jackson's reputation for hard-edged roles and Harvey's for his comedic wit seemed to complement each other when they were photographed together at various Hollywood events. At first glance, their interactions appeared friendly. They were seen together at various public events, sharing a camaraderie that suggested mutual respect. Their joint vacations with other industry powerhouses, including Magic Johnson and his wife Cookie, further painted a picture of a close-knit group of friends in Hollywood's elite circle. Yet as time went on, cracks began to show in their interactions. It wasn't long before rumors of tension began to circulate, particularly when it came to Steve Harvey's professional behavior. Jackson, who had witnessed Harvey's rise firsthand, began to hear whispers about the ways Harvey had allegedly stepped on others to climb the ladder, a pattern that seemed to conflict with the values he had built his career upon. Harvey, for his part, had his own suspicions about Jackson. Though the two had shared vacations and public appearances, there were underlying tensions that neither side had acknowledged. It wasn't until Jackson's candid comments about their time together on vacation that the full scope of their relationship began to unfold. For Jackson, what had once seemed like a casual friendship with Harvey was in hindsight far more complicated than he had initially let on. What had once appeared to be shared experiences of leisure and mutual respect now felt like a reminder of the discomfort he had been quietly harboring for years. As Jackson reflected on their past, it became clear that their connection was not as simple as it seemed. Harvey, with his polished persona and sometimes controversial career choices, had become the subject of Jackson's disillusionment. And for Jackson, it was the final straw. What had once seemed like friendship was really a facade hiding a deeper undercurrent of betrayal, resentment, and unfinished business that had yet to be addressed. Their friendship came to a head when Samuel L. Jackson opened up about Steve Harvey's role in the drama surrounding the 2019 controversy with Lori Harvey and Sean Diddy Combs. Jackson was outspoken in his criticism of Harvey's silence when it came to his daughter's relationship with Diddy, a much older man. In the eyes of Jackson, this was a moment where Harvey's reputation as a protector of family and values didn't align with his actions or lack thereof. While Harvey maintained his silence, Jackson saw it as tacit approval, and that was the moment that the bond between the two began to unravel. Jackson's decision to speak out was not just about his personal relationship with Harvey, but about his broader discontent with how Harvey's persona clashed with the reality behind the scenes. Their once friendship had long been overshadowed by Harvey's questionable actions in Hollywood, his silence in the face of controversy, and his repeated failures to own up to his mistakes. For Jackson, this was more than just personal disappointment. It was a public reckoning of a larger pattern of behavior that he could no longer ignore. The journeys of Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey to stardom were drastically different, yet both men carved out their own unique paths to the heights of Hollywood. Their stories are filled with perseverance, talent, and the realization that success in show business often comes with its own set of challenges. For Jackson, the path to fame was marked by hardship and reinvention, while for Harvey it was a steady climb built on comedy and charisma, but both men had to fight for their place in the industry. By the time Samuel L. Jackson landed his iconic role in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction 1994, he had already been through years of struggle, failure, and reinvention. Born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Jackson didn't have a silver spoon to launch his career. He faced many obstacles on his way to Hollywood, and his rise to stardom didn't come overnight. It was his deep involvement with theater and acting during his years at Morehouse College that sparked his passion for the craft. His college years were filled with struggles, both academic and personal, but he found solace in acting, taking on various roles in stage productions. He graduated in 1972, but the professional world of acting proved difficult to break into. Jackson's early years in Hollywood weren't glamorous. He landed a few small roles, but it was his involvement in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, 1989, that marked the beginning of his climb into the spotlight. This was a film that set the stage for Jackson to display his trademark intensity and commanding presence. His role in Do the Right Thing was just the beginning, but Jackson's reputation began to build. By the early 1990s, he had made a name for himself in supporting roles in films such as Jungle Fever 1991, True Romance 1993, and Jurassic Park 1993. Yet Jackson's true breakthrough came in 1994, when Quentin Tarantino cast him in the role of Jules Winfield in Pulp Fiction. This was the role that catapulted him into the realm of superstardom. The film itself was revolutionary in its style, dialogue, and structure, and Jackson's performance became one of the most memorable in cinematic history. His portrayal of Jules, an introspective hitman who quotes the Bible before executing his victims, was a masterstroke of acting. The film's success was in large part due to Jackson's standout role, earning him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. From that moment on, Samuel L. Jackson became a permanent fixture in Hollywood. His ability to jump between genres, whether action films like Die Hard with a Vengeance 1995 or The Avengers 2012, or dramas like The Great White Hype 1996, allowed him to build a diverse career. Jackson's unrelenting work ethic and his willingness to embrace a variety of characters ensured his long-lasting influence in Hollywood. His rise wasn't simply about taking big roles. It was about carving a space where he could continually redefine himself. His relationship with Tarantino, with whom he would collaborate on Jackie Brown 1997 and Django Unchained 2012, further solidified his place in cinematic history. Jackson's evolution was also marked by his increasing willingness to speak out about racial inequality in Hollywood. He became not just an actor, but a voice for change, challenging the industry's treatment of black actors. He spoke out about his struggles with racism both in his personal life and within the structure of Hollywood. His rise to fame was about more than just film roles. It was about using his platform to inspire others and call out the systemic issues he experienced. And as his career continued to blossom, Samuel L. Jackson became known as much for his activism as he was for his powerful performances. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Jackson was everywhere. His deep, gravelly voice became instantly recognizable, whether in action films, voiceovers, or comedic roles. He was the voice of Frozone in Disney's The Incredibles 2004, and his memorable turn as Mace Windu in Star Wars Episode One, The Phantom Menace, 1999, introduced him to an entirely new generation of fans. Jackson's name became synonymous with versatility, and he was no longer just a star, he was a brand. Unlike Jackson, whose rise was steeped in drama and film, Steve Harvey's ascent to fame was built on humor and a personal touch that connected him directly to audiences. Born in Welch, West Virginia and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, Harvey's story is one of persistence, a mix of failures and triumphs that helped shape his unique place in entertainment. He didn't have the immediate access to Hollywood that Jackson had. Instead, Harvey built his fame slowly, one step at a time. Harvey's first breakthrough came through stand-up comedy. After a failed stint in college, he began his stand-up career in the mid-1980s. But his path to success wasn't linear. In fact, Harvey spent years struggling financially, living in his car for a time and working odd jobs to make ends meet. His big break came when he performed on Showtime at the Apollo in 1990, where his natural charisma and witty humor caught the attention of audiences and industry insiders alike. That performance set the stage for his rise in the comedy world, and Harvey quickly became one of the most recognized voices in black comedy. In 1996, Harvey starred in his own sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show, which became an instant hit. The show, which showcased Harvey's comedic timing and his relatable portrayal of a high school teacher, quickly made him a household name. The show ran for 6 successful seasons and garnered a loyal fan base. At the same time, Harvey's stand-up career continued to thrive. His comedic style, which often focused on relationships, family dynamics, and the ups and downs of life, struck a chord with audiences. Harvey's relatable humor became his brand, allowing him to connect with people on a personal level. But it wasn't just television that Harvey conquered. In the early 2000s, he transitioned into hosting, which would become his most notable career move. He began hosting the Steve Harvey Morning Show in 2000, which became one of the most popular radio shows in the country. His comedic timing and larger-than-life personality resonated with listeners, making him a dominant voice in media. His popularity led to him landing the role of host for Family Feud in 2010, a move that significantly boosted his career. Harvey brought a refreshing energy to the show, and his antics with contestants became one of the main draws. Around this time, Harvey also became a best-selling author, releasing Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man in 2009, which became a cultural phenomenon. The book, which offered relationship advice, was a reflection of Harvey's persona, someone who had risen to fame not just through his humor, but through his personal experiences and perspectives on life. The book's success only further propelled Harvey into the spotlight, making him a voice of authority in both the entertainment and relationship advice spaces. His rise to fame, however, wasn't without its struggles. Harvey's personal life was as public as his career. He endured multiple failed marriages and was very open about his own missteps in love and relationships. His third marriage to Marjorie Bridges, however, became a symbol of his personal redemption. The couple's high-profile relationship became a key part of Harvey's brand, with fans admiring their chemistry and his apparent transformation from a comedian to a more polished media mogul. Despite their vastly different routes to fame, both Jackson and Harvey achieved significant success in their respective fields. Jackson's rise was defined by hard-hitting roles in iconic films and his unwavering commitment to activism, while Harvey's journey was marked by a steady climb through comedy, radio, television, and publishing. Both men reached the peak of their careers, becoming successful in ways that reflected their unique talents and the cultural shifts they each represented. However, their paths also showcased the differing ways black men navigated the entertainment world. Jackson, with his gritty, no-nonsense persona, became a symbol of breaking barriers in Hollywood, not just as a talented actor, but as someone who could use his influence to speak truth to power. Harvey, on the other hand, leveraged his comedy and media savvy to build an empire that focused on positivity, family, and self-help. While both were respected figures in the industry, their differences in style and approach laid the groundwork for the tension that would later come to define their relationship. Their paths intersected in Hollywood, with both men rising to fame in the 1990s and early 2000s. At the time, Jackson's more gritty and rebellious public persona complemented Harvey's polished comedic charm. On the surface, their shared success seemed like the perfect foundation for a lasting friendship. But the cracks were there, hidden behind the smiles and yacht photos. What began as mutual respect turned into a rivalry that neither man was willing to fully acknowledge at first. Jackson's openness about his struggles in Hollywood and his activism made him a figure who stood against the tide, challenging the industry's treatment of black talent. Harvey, on the other hand, built his career on maintaining an image of smooth professionalism, which was at odds with Jackson's more raw and outspoken style. Their rise to fame represented the contrasting approaches that often defined the black Hollywood experience. Jackson, the trailblazer, fighting for representation and authenticity, and Harvey, the charismatic media mogul, who used humor and self-help to build an empire. But as their careers grew, so did the tensions that eventually led to the unraveling of their relationship. What began as admiration for each other's successes eventually turned into the animosity that would spark the public feud we see today. Beneath the glossy surface of Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey's rise to fame lies a much darker narrative, one filled with personal betrayals, silent grudges, and uncomfortable truths that would eventually come to light. What many didn't know about their relationship, often perceived as a shining example of celebrity camaraderie, was a web of jealousy, rivalry, and unspoken tension that slowly began to take root as both men's careers reached new heights. For Jackson, this was the moment when he started to realize that the Hollywood he had fought so hard to break into was not as welcoming or as friendly as it seemed. For Harvey, it was a battle of maintaining his public persona while managing the chaos bubbling beneath the surface. Hollywood has long been known for its glitz, glamour, and power, but it also harbors secrets, hidden conflicts, and a cutthroat competitive atmosphere that can break even the strongest of people. In an industry where fame is fleeting, and where many entertainers often feel like pawns in a larger game, both Jackson and Harvey faced struggles that would challenge not only their professional success, but also their personal integrity. For Jackson, the dark side of Hollywood manifested early in his career, especially during his battle with addiction and the feeling of being overlooked despite his talent. Even after Pulp Fiction launched him into superstardom, Jackson's presence in the industry was often minimized, and he was still seen as a risky star by some Hollywood executives. Jackson's experiences with racism in Hollywood further fueled his sense of disillusionment. While he climbed the ranks, he found himself in roles that often reinforced stereotypical portrayals of black men, hitmen, criminals, or sidekicks. This did not sit well with him, and he took every opportunity to challenge the industry's restrictive views on race and character. However, the deeper he got into the industry, the more Jackson realized that his struggles were not just with roles, but with the power structures that dictated who got to be seen and who remained on the margins. In contrast, Steve Harvey's journey was more about cultivating an image of success that resonated with mainstream America. Yet behind the scenes, Harvey's climb to the top was marred by professional missteps, strained relationships, and a reputation for backstabbing. Harvey, who had written a best-selling book on relationships, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, was soon seen as an authority figure in the realm of dating advice, offering wisdom on everything from self-love to how men should behave. But behind his polished facade, Harvey had a history of controversial actions that were starting to catch up with him. In the comedy world, especially among black comedians, there has always been a sense of camaraderie, but also a fierce competition for spotlight and relevance. Steve Harvey's rise to fame didn't come without its enemies, particularly other comedians who felt that Harvey's success was built on the backs of their work. One of the most significant instances of betrayal was Harvey's alleged attempt to sabotage Bernie Mac, one of the most beloved comedians in the world, to advance his own career. Mac, who was a key member of the original Kings of Comedy, was reportedly unhappy with the way Harvey positioned himself in the group. According to sources close to Mac, Harvey tried to take the spotlight from Mac during their comedy tours. But it wasn't just the stage that saw the tension, it extended into Hollywood itself. Allegations began to surface that Harvey had attempted to steal the role in Ocean's 11 2001, which eventually went to Bernie Mac. The rumor was that Harvey, who had been vying for a bigger role in the film, used his influence to push Mac out of the running. This accusation set the stage for a rocky relationship between Harvey and many of his peers. It wasn't just Bernie Mac who felt betrayed. Comedians like Cat Williams and Mark Curry began to come forward with stories of how Harvey allegedly borrowed material from other comics without credit, and worse, took credit for ideas that weren't his own. Harvey's public persona as a family man and role model was starting to crumble under the weight of accusations of dishonesty, manipulation, and exploitation. One of the most telling moments that would unravel Steve Harvey's carefully crafted persona occurred in the summer of 2019. His daughter, Lori Harvey, was seen with Sean "Diddy" Combs, a man nearly twice her age. The relationship sparked immediate public outrage due to the disturbing optics of a father allowing his daughter to date someone so much older, especially considering Diddy's long history of high-profile relationships with women much younger than him. But what was most shocking wasn't just the age gap, it was Steve Harvey's complete silence. Harvey, who had written books and given speeches on how to protect and value women, was now conspicuously quiet. In fact, photos of the entire family, Steve, Marjorie, Diddy, and Lori, seated at a dinner in Italy seemed to paint a picture of normalcy, as though there was no issue with the relationship at all. For many, it felt like Harvey's silence was either tacit approval or worse, a form of complicity in a situation that was morally questionable. Jackson, who had witnessed the fallout from afar, didn't mince words when he spoke up about the situation. For him, Harvey's silence wasn't just about a father's lack of protection for his daughter. It represented a deeper issue of compromise and corruption. Jackson had no problem calling out what he saw as hypocrisy, a man who had written about protecting women now ignoring what was happening under his own roof. His words were cutting, but they resonated with many who had also been questioning Harvey's choices and the way he had conducted himself in both his personal and professional life. As the years went on, more and more people began to turn their backs on Steve Harvey, not just because of the silence surrounding his daughter's relationship with Diddy, but because of the growing suspicion that Harvey had built his empire on the backs of others. Many began to see Harvey not as the self-made mogul he portrayed himself to be, but as a man who had climbed to the top by stepping on those around him. The accusations from Cat Williams, Mark Curry, and others were not isolated. They painted a picture of a man who had strategically positioned himself in the limelight by exploiting others. For Samuel L. Jackson, the realization that Steve Harvey was not the man he appeared to be hit hard. He had seen Harvey's actions, the way he interacted with people behind the scenes, and how he maneuvered through Hollywood, and it didn't sit right with him. The cracks in their friendship, which had always been there but previously unnoticed, began to widen, eventually leading to Jackson's decision to publicly distance himself from Harvey. The final straw, however, wasn't just the personal betrayals. It was the realization that Hollywood's elite often protect each other at the cost of integrity. In a world where silence could be bought, where powerful men like Diddy and Harvey could control narratives, Jackson knew that his silence on the matter would only contribute to the very culture he had fought so hard against. It was a hard truth, one that many in Hollywood had to face whether they were willing to admit it or not. What was once perceived as a strong friendship between two powerful figures, Jackson and Harvey, eventually crumbled under the weight of deceit, jealousy, and unspoken truths. Harvey, who had always tried to maintain the image of a self-made success story, was exposed as a man who had manipulated his way through Hollywood. Jackson, who had once seen Harvey as a friend, now recognized the flaws in the man he had shared vacations with. The two were no longer allies, and their relationship would never return to its former state. As Jackson's career continued to soar, and as Harvey's reputation began to tarnish, the split between the two men became symbolic of a larger rift within Hollywood. Behind the shiny facade of celebrity friendships, there often lies a much darker reality, one that is driven by ambition, betrayal, and the brutal nature of the entertainment industry. Jackson's decision to speak out was a rare moment of honesty in a world that often hides its darkest truths behind closed doors. As the story of Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey unfolds, we're left to confront the complex, often painful reality behind the glittering world of Hollywood friendships. What seemed like a tale of two powerful men who had forged a bond in the entertainment industry was, in truth, a story of betrayal, silence, and conflicting ideals. For Jackson, this wasn't about petty grievances or superficial conflicts. It was about authenticity, integrity, and standing up for what he believed was right. Jackson's willingness to speak out and expose the uncomfortable truths about Harvey was a powerful moment of personal revelation. In an industry where many are silent to protect their careers, Jackson chose honesty over comfort. His decision to shed light on the hypocrisy and the strained dynamics of their relationship wasn't just an attack on Harvey, it was a call for accountability in an industry that too often turns a blind eye to power plays, manipulation, and moral compromises. For Jackson, the final straw wasn't just about how Harvey handled his daughter's relationship with Diddy, but about the realization that Harvey had been part of a system he had fought so hard against. Steve Harvey, on the other hand, is left to grapple with the fallout of his silence and the growing list of accusations that now haunt his career. The man who once portrayed himself as the epitome of family values and relationship wisdom is now exposed as someone who, for many, failed to live up to the ideals he so often preached. Whether it's his involvement in taking credit for others' work or his refusal to stand up for his own family, Harvey's story has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of building a public persona on a shaky foundation. But it's not just about Jackson and Harvey. Their story serves as a broader commentary on Hollywood's obsession with image over substance and the cost of loyalty in an industry where alliances are often built on convenience rather than genuine connection. The emotional payoff here isn't just the satisfaction of seeing a celebrity feud unfold. It's the realization that true friendship, respect, and integrity are rarer than we might think in the world of fame. In the end, both men are left to reckon with their own legacies. For Jackson, his legacy will always be one of uncompromising authenticity, while for Harvey, it may be marked by the cracks in his image that can never fully be repaired. As we reflect on this story, we ask ourselves, in an industry defined by competition and self-promotion, where do we draw the line between loyalty and self-preservation? And how far are we willing to go for success before we compromise the very values we claim to hold dear? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complex relationship between Samuel L. Jackson and Steve Harvey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more captivating stories of Hollywood's hidden truths and the men and women who shaped our culture.